So thank you very much for your time. What we're going to do today is we're going to look at um, what we call personal planning tactics. And so I want to make a little distinction here. Financial planning tactics, when should I take OAS, CPP? What's the optimum order of withdrawal from portfolios? Would a RIF meltdown be of advantage? These are all things that are just 100% math, a lot of them, tax-based and so on. So pretty much they should all be applied to any plan to get whatever optimization we can. However, what I refer to as personal planning tactics are things that really involve the clients in the decision. Obviously, funding wants, if we have a shortfall such as we do, then we might look at different things that we want to change, what we spend on vacations, what we spend on vehicles, and so on. And I had originally intended to do that today, but what I've decided to do, because it's a little more involved, is to do a whole separate webinar next week on it. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to focus on career income, reverse mortgages, and downsizing a home. And I want to just, again, help you better understand how all of this works. So you'll notice that Bill and Sue are 60 and 55. They're going to retire in a number of years' time. Bill's going to still work till 70, Sue 65. But you'll see here we're getting a shortfall in the main bank account. So one of the things that in that case you most likely will need to do is have a look at portfolio start ages, withdrawal start ages. And you can see the joint portfolio for Bill at 65, but TFSA not till 70, RSP 72 and so on. So we need to get rid of that negative bank account, and doing things like starting CPP earlier and so on may not be enough, may not get the job done. And also I want to remind you, one of the things we looked at a couple of weeks ago is that if we defer CPP to age 70, then and OAS, then we get that additional amount. But what's also interesting is because we get that additional amount, we also take less out of our registered plans, TFSAs and RSPs. RSPs also, of course, attracting tax. But by leaving that money in the registered plans where it's compounding, it actually has a very significant impact on wealth. And I would suggest more so than just that additional income that we'll get. So I'm just going to click the calculate button, and we'll just let the software decide, when withdrawals should be started and from what and so on. And you can see actually it's starting Bill's RSP withdrawals earlier, keeping his TFSA till later. So that's corrected that bank account problem. It's obviously reduced the wealth, but I'm going to apply that. And then what I want to do is I want to go down through career income, reverse mortgages, and so on. So let's go to the career income tab. And you can see here Bill and Sue, and you can click more details to actually see current income. And I've set this, reasonably low intentionally. It's all part of the big shortfall here. And I want to show you something else that I think is quite important. So I want you to remember that one of the things that is built into the software is a whole exercise on people's financial attitudes. So 27 statements, there are 9 attitudes, 3 statements per attitude. And if we go to solutions, one of the things that we'll see for Bill is when we look at his attitudes, is click show table, is that he actually has a very high work score. And the point of this is very simple. If in their case, there's a big financial shortfall, and if somebody said, I want to retire at 60, then obviously, the early retirement is going to have a pretty big effect on the shortfall, drawing down retirement resources 5 years earlier, 5 years longer, and having less career income for those 5 years with, additional savings, contributions, stars, fees, and so on. The issue is that if somebody has a low work score and we turn around and say, well, you've got a big financial shortfall, you're going to have to work longer, I pretty much guarantee you that they're going to throw the plan out because that's just not who they are. Similarly, for example, there's a difference between spending, which is kind of everyday spending, and spending on appearance. And appearance is things like homes, clothes, cars, and so on. So if somebody enjoys driving a nice car or has a healthy clothing budget, and you say, oh, you're going to have to cut down on what you spend on those things, again, that plan's just not going to suit the client. So we need to look at different ways of getting from where they are to where they want to be. And in Bill's case, he has a good work score. So that's telling us, why don't we talk with him about his career? Portfolio returns, for example, don't have to do all the heavy lifting. What could his career contribute to him achieving what he wants in life? The other thing is that I have them with a house worth about $1 million. Not uncommon in today's world. So we're talking about people that have, a lot invested in real estate, homes and cottages, to the point where they're asset rich, but they're cash poor. And I don't think that that's uncommon in today's world, and possibly, something that we're going to see more of in the future. So let's go back to planning tactics. And what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to apply the career income. And the way this works is, in some cases, if the financial forecast is quite good, you could just click calculate earliest retirement age, and that would, be done. Or what you can do, for example, is you could say, well, let's say 5 years from now, what kind of income would you need to earn in 5 years for your career to correct the shortfall? Now you can see it's a big shortfall. So all we need to do is click calculate target income, and the software will go through and figure out how much that would have to be. Now, the other thing that we'll be looking at today is not relying solely on a particular tactic. So clearly, if Bill's making $50,000, the probability of making 177 in 5 years isn't that great. So we can talk in terms, well, what do you think you could achieve? So let's just, as an example, put in 75,000. Bill's a financial advisor. Has control over his income. So we're going to use 75,000, we'll apply it. And what you'll see then is that the crossover point changes from 2042. It's not huge, but it's out now to about 2046. What I want to do next is I want to apply a reverse mortgage. In other words, we want to tap into the equity of the house. And when you do a calculate, you have two approaches. One is to take a lump sum amount, take everything that you need today, bank it, and have it last you for your lifetime, keeping in mind that we're going to have to pay interest on that lump sum loan right from the beginning. So let's just see what result we get. And I want you to notice down here the value of the estate. So it's very important to see the residue, the liquid assets of the estate. They were about 2.8 million. And you can see that they jump up to 5 million, and the value of the estate also declines from 12 to 8. These are in inflated dollar terms, so keeping in mind the value of the house, and we can switch to today's dollars at any time. So the estate now would be worth $1 million, and the residue would be negative 2.5 million. This is the estate value is after that residue, negative residue. So what we also see is that the amount of the principal that we'd have to borrow is 815,000 on a home in inflated dollar terms of 3.5 million. Again, 538 on an inflated value of 2.3 million. So let's just assume for a moment that we don't take the lump sum, but instead we have a look at doing a draw. So a draw is we arrange the reverse mortgage and then we simply take money from it as necessary. Usually in the first year, there's a minimum amount of around 25,000. Now, what you're going to see is that we actually have to take out a little bit more. But on the other hand, the negative residue for the estate is better off because we're not paying all that interest over all that period. Similarly, the estate value is about $1 million better off. But again, it's 886 as a percent of 357, which is about 25%. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cancel this because instead of taking the reverse mortgage on the existing home, let's look at what would happen if we tapped into the home, we downsized it, and took some equity out. So we'll do a downsized home. We'll click calculate, and we'll find out when do we need to downsize it, which will be around the 2046, and what value would we need to pay for our downsized home. And we can see then that our $3.5 million home, we have to downsize to 2.7. And again, if we look at today's dollars, 2.3 down to 1.8. So let's just for a moment assume that they look at that and they say, fine, but that's a little bit too much of a downsize for us. We would be comfortable downsizing from a 3.5 to a 3 million. Again, keeping in mind we're talking in inflated dollars just for illustration purposes. So all we need to do is correct that, click apply. And again, we see that we won't have thoroughly corrected everything, but we've pushed things out now actually to the point where they're in their late 80s or mid 80s in the case of Sue. But then we can go back and we can look at the reverse mortgage and say, okay, now what would happen if we took out a reverse mortgage? And if we go to calculate, select draws again, then we'll see how much we need to take out. And you can see that it's appreciably less. It's 360,000 as a percent of the value of the downsized home, which is only about 7.5%. And I want to bring this to your attention. And again, if we go to the today's dollar output, we can see it's a 2.7, and we're only taking out a reverse mortgage of 203,000. And again, that's 7.5%. So the reason I wanted to run through that is because anything that I've ever done in modeling reverse mortgages and trying them and so on, they actually look to be quite effective for people who lack income producing assets and have built a lot of wealth in the value of their principal residence. And yet, I find when I read articles that reverse mortgages are given a bit of a bad rap. And I think it's because when I look at the math that they're using, nobody accounts for the appreciation rate of the property. They only talk about, the cost of the interest on the reverse mortgage. So what I want to show you is something that we've done in the software. And before I do it, I want to remind you that when you're doing a plan where there's any kind of comparison, so if we look at the value of advice, for instance, there's a section in there, how much are you better off? And then there are a couple of graphs, net worth and income assets. Your starting point might be your initial vision, and the plan as it's evolved. What's the difference in net worth and income assets? So in order to get up anything that's a comparison, you have to select the baseline plan and then the selected plan. So the selected plan is the one we've been working with, of course. And the start ages only is where I began, where I just changed the start dates of the different portfolios to get rid of that negative bank account. And then from there, we applied everything else. So what I want to show you is that when we have a look at this, you're going to see a section in the report which actually compares the value of the estate. So you can see the reverse mortgage talks about, the impact on the plan. Obviously, you're going to be worth less. You've taken out a reverse mortgage. And it builds a table. What are you going to borrow, relative to the value of your house? You can see I mentioned 7.5, it's 8. And then the dollar amounts that you'll be taking out and the graph that shows how that corrects the bank account. Remember, we're not focused on the last year because we're looking at wealth rather than the estate. But there's also a table or a pie graph with tables. And what it shows us is this is the value before we have the estate changes, and then the value after. And there is not a significant drop off in the value. So I think that's really important because as far as I can tell, people's aversion to doing reverse mortgages is, the value of my estate is largely in my house. That's what I want to leave my children and so on and so on. And yet anything that I've ever done, especially when we're looking at just the draws, it does not appreciably erode the value of the estate, again, if we're applying that long-term appreciation rate in residential real estate. So that the value of the estate is kind of staying whole in inflated dollar terms. Obviously, it'll be less in constant dollar terms because we're giving up some of that appreciation. But it's still not as devastating as people, I think, tend to think it is. So those are the things that I wanted to cover today. Not a great deal, but just those, what I refer to as personal planning tactics. And then I think next week we'll get into funding wants, because you can see there's a lot that can be done. We can say, if we're thinking about buying a property like a cottage or something like that, what would happen if we bought the cottage or didn't buy the cottage? What would happen if, how would that look in our financial forecast? Or, if some things are more important to us than others, what would happen if we reduced our spending on things like vacations or vehicles and so on? And, we can go in and play with a bunch of these different features. And I think we should keep that a separate session, because it is a bit different. And I don't want to, pack too much into today's session. So I'd like to throw things open for any questions you might have.
Hey, Michael, it's Ryan. No, that's great. So when downsizing the home and the
Yeah.
planning tactics, what is
Yeah.
it doing with the expenses for
Good.
the future
Yeah.
house?
Yeah. Great question. So what it's doing is, so I shouldn't be here. Let me go to the entries, and we will go to the downsized home. So you can see we're downsizing it in 2046. And you can see property taxes are $5,000. What we're doing with the downsized home for property taxes is we're actually reducing it in proportion to the value of the house.
Oh, that's great.
Okay. Now, we're not reducing operating expenses. So it's true, smaller house, might affect heat and so on. But other things, internet, garbage collection, you name it, somebody that comes and shovels our snow or cuts our grass or, whatever. Those things are unlikely to change. So we haven't changed those, but we've just proportionately reduced property taxes. We think that's a pretty sure bet.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, thanks.
Anybody else with any questions? Okay, so thanks for your time. Next week, we're going to get into funding one. So, the idea is that we have the ability to address the circumstances of people where, their financial position is maybe very wealthy in the sense of their things, house and cottage, but they're living a healthy lifestyle and they're just not saving enough. And so we can look at other ways of getting them from where they are to where they want to be, rather than just, portfolio returns and savings. Tapping into the equity of homes is, a pretty classic example in today's world. So thanks for your time, and I wish you a great weekend.